Section 1. Cold War Genesis, From Blueprint to Deterrent, October 27, 1962. 35,000 feet over the Arctic Circle. The sun is a thin brass coin pressed against the horizon. The B-52H shudders as jet wash curls over its 8 TF-33 turbofans. In the left seat, Major Daniel Deke Warren glances at the engine stack EGT steady. Fuel balance good while the electronic warfare officer, Captain Ruth Morales, keeps a palm on the ALR-46 threat receiver, eyes flicking between spikes and static. In the bomb bay, the massive rotary launcher sits inert and terrible, a reminder of the mission airborne alert, Operation Chrome Dome. On the interphone, the radar navigator murmurs a fix, Greenland ice edge abeam, turn 2 degrees port. The cockpit smells of hydraulic fluid and coffee. The world below is cloud and ice, but the tension lives here in the crew's measured breaths as the Cuban Missile Crisis grinds toward an outcome none of them control. The story of this aircraft begins 15 years earlier, far from the Arctic, on paper that smelled of graphite and ambition. In 1946-48, Boeing's Model 464 kept mutating straight wings to swept, turboprops to turbojets as the U.S. Air Force sharpened its post-war requirement, a long-range intercontinental bomber capable of carrying a nuclear payload across oceans, outrunning interceptors, and returning on its own wings. In October 1948, a marathon meeting between Boeing engineers Ed Wells, George Scherer, and USAF officers pivoted the design decisively: 35-degree swept wings, potted engines, bicycle landing gear with outriggers, and a thin, efficient high-altitude planform. The prototype XB-52 took shape as a bird of the jet age, lean and lethal. On April 15, 1952, the XB-52 finally lifted from Boeing Field. It didn't just fly, it declared an era. With 8 Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojets slung in 4 twin pods, and a 185-foot wingspan designed to bite thin air at the edge of the stratosphere, the aircraft promised reach and speed in one hulking package. Early trials shook out teething pains, hydraulics, fuel feed, wing loading, but the airframe's bones were overbuilt and forgiving, a gift future generations would unwrap again and again. By June 1955, the B-52B entered service with Strategic Air Command under General Curtis E. LeMay, who understood what it meant to point a long arm at the world and be believed. It wasn't just an airplane, it was a posture. SAC built a ritual around it, alert pads at Loring, Barksdale, Minot, and Fairchild, Victor alerts and MITO minimum interval, takeoff drills where Stratofortresses thundered into gray skies 30 seconds apart, each a flying promise that deterrence would not blink. Crews learned the rhythms, checklist catechisms, celestial fixes, AN, APN in 89, LORAN, refueling brackets behind KC-97s and later KC-135s, and the discipline of positive control, the coded messages that would, God forbid, turn a patrol into an order. They practiced for a war designed never to happen. And in that paradox, the B-52 found its first purpose to exist so that nothing else would. In the cockpit, Major Warren adjusts the pressure suit cuffs and watches contrails stitch the cold. The tail gunner, still there in these years, a tradition of bomber lineage, calls out a speck that isn't there, then laughs softly at his own nerves. Below, Thule sits on the map like a fingernail clipping in white space. Behind them, the tanker track curls like a shepherd's crook, ahead, an orbit line that keeps the aircraft inside range rings calculated down to the gallon. Captain Morales tests the AN-LT-28 jammers, their electronic snarl standing ready to foul Soviet radars should the world tilt the wrong way. The Cuban Missile Crisis made all of this suddenly not theoretical. On the ground, men argued over photographs and brinkmanship. In the air, crews obeyed altitudes and timing with a devotion that was almost liturgical. Chrome Dome missions set B-52s circling polar routes and Mediterranean arcs so that, if catastrophe ripped the phone lines from their cradles, the bomber force would already be airborne, halfway to the fight. The Stratofortress became a global silhouette fuel-streaked belly, velvet roar of 8 engines, wingtips flexing against the cold. The world's most dangerous metronome, ticking in hours and tanker rendezvous. Yet even in this age of doctrine and diagrams, the airplane revealed its second identity, adaptability. Engineers in Wichita and Seattle built a modular philosophy into the jet-removable black boxes, accessible bays, room in the electrical and cooling systems for equipment that didn't exist yet. Radios and radars could be pulled, replaced, upgraded. Wiring looms were routed with future ghosts in mind circuits not yet named, frequencies not yet discovered. Where other aircraft were products, the B-52 was a platform, a living laboratory that could absorb the next idea and make it doctrine. Back in the Arctic, Major Warren rubs the frost off a side window with a gloved knuckle. He thinks, absurdly, of his son's balsa model hanging from the ceiling in Omaha, and of how much heavier the real thing feels in the bones. The navigator, a calm Ohioan named Lieutenant Parker, reads out a celestial fix regulus. Antares, Vega and the autopilot eats the correction like a well-trained dog. A chime sounds in the headsets, HF burst, coded. Captain Morales folds the strip, hands it forward. The pilot and co-pilot look at each other once, then break the seal. They do not yet know, cannot know, that this airplane will fly over Vietnam and Cambodia, will drop iron and later precision munitions over Iraq, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and the Syria-Iraq theater, that it will carry AGM-86 cruise missiles, lightning pods, data links, and ideas no 1952 engineer could have drawn without being laughed from the room. For now, it is only wind, ice, fuel, range, and the quiet conviction that the machine will do what it was built to do, hold the line in a world learning how not to end. The chime again. The pilot reads the latest DEFCON holds. He exhales, and the Stratofortress keeps its patient turn. Wings flexing like a great bird settling in for the long, cold watch. Beyond the canopy rim, the earth turns slow, blue, alive. Section 2. The Unconventional Warrior Vietnam, Arc Light, and a New Identity, June 18, 1965. Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. The heat is a wet hand on the back of the neck. On the ramp, a line of B-52F's fresh gray paint and oil-dark streaks quivers in the tropical shimmer. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hacksaw Dwyer climbs the ladder by muscle memory, past the bomb nav panel where a radar scope hums, into a cockpit thick with checklist cadence. Somewhere inland on the map is Ben Cat, and beyond it a free fire box drawn with ruler straight lines. This is Operation Arc Light, the first time the B-52 will be used, not as a nuclear hammer poised above the chessboard, but as a conventional bludgeon, swung with theater-level intent. At 09 Hazaro, the first cells lift, heavy and deliberate. A cell 3 bombers, staggered altitudes, precise time-on-target deconfliction. Each carries over 40,000 pounds of 750 and 500-pound bombs. Up front, the J-57s gulp humid air and give it back as a carpet of thunder over South Vietnam. Controllers speak in call signs and codes. On the ground, forest and red soil await a metamorphosis measured in milliseconds. The radar navigator stares into the AN/ASQ-38 scope. Writing electronic geography meanders of the Saigon River. The notch of a hill. The gleam that means a village roof he must avoid. The airplane, born to usher fission across continents, is now a geometry of steel drawn across jungle canopies. The effect is both tactical and psychological. Arc light strikes do not chase individual platoons. They erase positions, pluck roads from maps, turn suspected base areas into lunar seas of craters. Infantry battalions learn to move after the shock, to flow around the new terrain, to marry their own assaults to the aftermath. When the B-52D Big Belly arrives, her bomb bays re-racked to carry 84 MiG-82s internally and 24 externally. The sky itself seems to acquire weight. Crews who trained for polar orbits now calculate bomb pattern density and trail timing. EWO officers who rehearsed jamming Soviet fire control radars now study SA-2 fan song tactics and A-belts borrowed from another war entirely. The airplane changes to meet the moment. Black paint blooms on the undersides of B-52Ds to mitigate searchlights. AN/ALQ-117 and later ALQ-155 ECM systems sprout in the belly. Chaff dispensers, MJU-10, RR-129 become part of the crew's muscle memory. Aerial refueling over the South China Sea becomes ritual. Tanker booms bob like metronomes against a monsoon sky. The jet that once cruised unwavering at the edge of the stratosphere now lives inside weather, its wings cutting cumulus into halves and letting them heal behind. Then December 1972 clicks onto the calendar, Linebacker 2. 11 nights that will pin the word Christmas to echoes no hymn ever meant to carry. Hanoi and Haiphong bristle with SA-2s, MiG-cap, and 100mm guns. The plan is brutal in its clarity mass. Repeat. Break the defenses by attrition and shock. The first nights our bloody missile fans climb in elegant death curves, and crews watch green comets bend toward the bomber stream. The interphone becomes a grammar of violence. Spike. 3 o'clock launch chaff, now break right. The ECM screens jitter with strobes. B-52Gs and Ds weave in ponderous, pre-briefed jinx. And now and then the sky acquires a new sun as a Stratofortress takes a hit. 15 B-52s will be lost over the campaign. Hundreds of aircrew will measure a life's worth of adrenaline in seconds. But the system learns fast. Tactics shift altitudes adjusted. Ingress routes varied. Jamming corridors tightened. Chaff windows synchronized with wild weasel suppression. The third night is not the first. The sixth is something else again. By the time negotiators sit down in Paris with new urgency, the B-52, so unsuited, in theory, to this close-quarter duel has achieved what it always promised: decisive, theater-shaping pressure. It is a beast of habit that can also learn. And in Linebacker 2, the learning is paid in blood, tallied in SAM fragments that ping like hail against aluminum skin. Between sorties, crews trade superstitions. A navigator ties the same green pencil to his kneeboard. The EWO eats half a lucky strike for courage. A pilot taps the H clock twice before engines start. Maintenance troops, crew chiefs with hands like scarred leather. Avionics techs who can hear a failing gyro before the scope shows it worked the night shift. With coffee that tastes like burnt rope. They are as much authors of this airplane's legend as any pilot, because they keep it available. The Stratofortress, unlike many prima donnas of the flight line, is a team sport: access panels, ladders, safety pins, a ballet of torque wrenches and safety wire carried out under bug-buzzing lights while thunderheads prowl the far hills. By 1973, the B-52 has done something even its advocates didn't entirely predict. It has rebranded itself. No longer only a nuclear icon, It is now a conventional instrument of massed fires, a platform that can stitch grid squares into policy. It is proven that altitude, payload, and endurance can be disciplined into precision of effect, even when the bombs are dumb and the weather is not. And across the Pacific, as it returns to Guam and Utapao, a generation of aircrew learns the strangest truth of the machine they fly, that its age is an asset. Old systems can be understood, modified, taught new tricks. The airframe's margin, its generous wing, its capacious bays, its sturdy spine means fresh ideas find room to live. On the last sortie of a long tour, Lieutenant Colonel Dwyer signs the forms with a sunburnt hand and watches his jet taxi in. Brakes hissing. The crew chief snaps a salute with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how many rivets live in a panel and which ones ache when the wing flexes. The airplane is older than some of the airmen who tend it, and yet it feels younger than the doctrine it just rewrote. Night creeps up over the Pacific. The B-52s sit in a row like dinosaurs that learned to sing and now can't stop. Section 3. From Desert Storm to the Digital Age, Global Reach, Precision, and the Wired Bomber, January 16, 1991. Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana. The crew bus smells like canvas and diesel. Inside, a half-dozen airmen ride in silence, flight bags against their knees, as vapor plumes curl from the roofs of B-52 Stratofortresses waiting under arc lights. In the left seat of one of them, Captain Lee Carter tightens his harness and feels the low tremor of 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 P-3-103 engines through the seat rails. On the weapons panel, the numbers are stark AGM-86C CALCMs. Conventional air-launched cruise missiles programmed with GPS coordinates half a world away. The briefers called this one a first. A 35-hour, 14,000-mile strike from Konus to the heart of Iraq and back. The longest combat mission ever flown at the time. The interphone clicks with ritual calm, INS aligned. Turprom verified, tanker track green 3 KC-10s ready. They launch into winter dark, then knit the night together with aerial refuelings over the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. At the push time, somewhere west of Israel, the bomb doors stay closed. Instead, under the wings, pylons spit CAL-CMs into the slipstream like bright seeds. The weapon's small turbojets catch. Each missile drops, stabilizes, then knifes away on its own intelligence toward power stations, C2 nodes, and air defense hubs in Baghdad and beyond. The bombers bank for home, a constellation of tankers waiting to shepherd them back over oceans. On televisions around the world, anti-aircraft tracers stitch the Baghdad sky, and somewhere far beyond that camera frame, a machine built in the 1950s quietly rewrites what global reach means. Days later, the B-52Gs forward at Diego Garcia and Jeddah get to work with more familiar thunder. Cells of 3 labor up into the blue, bellies heavy with May 82-84 iron, CBADU 87-89 cluster munitions, and later lugs wired for WCMD. The radar navigators ride the AN/ASQ-38 and MSQ systems, correlating sand geometry with pre-planned points. EWOs keep AN/ALQ-155 jammers warm and chaff flare sequences rehearsed. Over Kuwait's desert, triangular shadow carpets slide across the ground, and when the toggles drop, the patterns bloom with mathematical cruelty. Republican Guard armor learns to fear a sky that can erase grid squares. Tank crews who once hid in palm groves watch the trees themselves lift and fall like skirts in a hot wind. The airplane's third life begins in the years that follow, when precision migrates from black programs into the bones of everyday war. During Operation Allied Force 1999, B-52H crews introduced JDAM GPS-guided bombs that ignore weather and smoke and go where coordinates tell them. Sensors and data links proliferate RQ-2210 radios, SADL, Link 16 gateways in certain tails. And eventually the Connect upgrade combat network communications technology that floods the cockpit with digital mission updates, chat, and re-rolled target sets. By Afghanistan, 2001, a Stratofortress can loiter for hours at altitude while special forces on horseback pass 10-digit grids up a chain that ends under the B-52's wing. Cleared hot. A controller says from a valley 2 ridgelines away. The bomb bay answers with GBU-31s falling through cloud as if it weren't there at all. On the ramp at Al Udeid in 2003, ground crews bolt a lightning or sniper pod to the wing root adapter, an odd sight on a heavy bomber, as if a cathedral had sprouted a periscope. But it works. The pod turns the B-52 into a non-traditional ISR platform, able to spot, verify, lace when paired, record, and talk. The crew can scan a city block, confirm the target, wave off for civilians, or re-attack with coordinates corrected to the 4th decimal. The language inside the jet modernizes KMLs. SIPR chat, 9 lines, rover feeds. The old bomber absorbs them without fuss, as if it had been waiting all along. Defensively, 2. The bones prove hospitable to new organs. AN ALR-46 threat receivers give way to AN ALR-20A and ALR-56 variants. The AN ALQ-172 keeps pace with radar-guided threats. Wiring looms make room for missile approach warners and improved countermeasure dispensers. The old tailgun, a machine gun echo of another century, fades into history as threats shift and weight is better spent on electrons and fuel. The cockpit remains a study in analog dignity, steam gauges, and broad. Mechanical switches, but glass finds its way into the glare shield. And knee boards sprout tablets like new leaves. And always, the airframe abides. The 185-foot wing flexes and breathes. The spars carry loads that would break lesser spines. Crew chiefs trace fingertips along access panels that have been opened and closed more times than anyone can count. Safety wire curled like silver ferns. In the phase dock, a B-52's skin patched, repainted, re-riveted reads like a palimpsest of campaigns, sea grime, desert storm tan dust, the faint salt of Diego Garcia trade winds. Pilots new to the jet learn an old truth. The Stratofortress is not fast like a fighter or nimble like an attack jet. But it is relentless. It stays. In a war measured in weeks or months. Staying is often the point. By the 2010s, the bomber's mission set looks almost heretical compared to 1952. New Fantasy's standoff AGM-86C DKLCMs, direct attack JDAM, mines, maritime strike rehearsals, close air support via talk-on, and show-of-force runs that shake mud walls without firing a shot. The jet becomes a communication node. A presence the kind of thing a commander places not because of any single weapon on the loadout, but because an aircraft that can loiter half a day within a theater-wide comms web changes the psychology of a fight. On tough nights, JTACs learn the comfort of knowing there's a Buff, the affectionate, impolite nickname up there on station, unhurried, patient, ready. There are still moments when the old animal bares its teeth. In Syria and Iraq, B-52Hs roll in with JDAM stacks against ISIS strongpoints, their pods quietly recording battle damage for analysts and prosecutors alike. In exercises over the Pacific, they practice maritime target area coordination, tossing quick strike ER concepts and LRASM surrogates around planning rooms to see what sticks. The machine that once represented a single kind of apocalypse becomes a toolbox for many smaller endings, a bunker gone, a road cut, a silence imposed on a radio net that used to chatter. One evening over Helmand, with the sun setting like a melted coin into dust, a B-52H circles at FL 300, the engines a steady furnace note. The navigator, who wasn't alive when the Berlin Wall fell, talks a young JTAC onto a target with the voice of a coach and a big brother. The EWO monitors a sky largely empty of radar threats, ready anyway. The aircraft commander watches fuel and time like twin hourglasses, calculating another station extension, another favor to a platoon fighting in streets with no names. When the clearance comes, the bombs fall two bright commas written into a long, complicated sentence. Back on the ramp, the crew steps into a warm wash of JP-8 and hydraulic fluid. A crew chief grins, holds up a panel latch that started to worry again, and says, "She's got personality." The pilot nods. The bomber's age is not an apology, it's a credential. Section 4. The secret to its staying power engineering that refuses to age. March 12, 2006. Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. OCALC Depot, Hangar 3001. The doors rumble open like a theater curtain, and a B-52H rolls in. Paint scuffed, panel edges fretted with dust from another desert. Heat guns hum. Scissor lifts rise. Master Sergeant Alina Torres, a crew chief with a silver Sharpie tucked behind one ear, runs a gloved hand along the wing root fillet, feeling for the familiar cool of alclad aluminum. Above her, the 185-foot wing bows gently, a cathedral rib cage of spars and stringers. Somewhere aft, a rivet gun starts its staccato, and the hangar fills with a sound older than most of the airmen here, metal being asked to serve again. The airplane's longevity begins not with romance, but with excess margin, a structure designed for high altitude, long endurance flight, and the brutal loads of intercontinental fuel weights. The B-52's semi-monocoque fuselage and high aspect ratio wing were built with the sins of uncertainty in mind. A Cold War habit of adding strength where math got fuzzy. When engineers say forgiving, they mean fail-safe cracked stringer. The neighbor carries load. Worn fastener hole, cold working, and oversized repair give the metal a second chance. Decades later, that conservative math is still paying interest. Under the skin, its genius is modularity. Access panels, so many panels open into black box neighborhoods where radios, nav gear, and ECM can be pulled and swapped like organs. Original J-57 turbojets yielded to TF-33 turbofans on the H model without changing the airframe's character. Wiring bundles were routed with slack and future capacity. Myth. Quietly retired in this hangar, the B-52 never had turboprops. In the 2000s and 2010s, the jet swallowed connect racks, ARC 210s, digital moving maps, and data link gateways as if they'd been in the blueprint all along. When sniper and littoning pods arrived, a wing root adapter made a heavyweight bomber into a sensor truck, no fuss. Just torque values and safety wire. Beneath the belly, programmed depot maintenance PDM unfolds like a liturgy. Corrosion is hunted in bilge bays with bore scopes and bright lights. Fuel cells in the wet wing are purged and resealed. Landing gear trucks, those swivelable bicycle mains with outriggers, are measured and shimmied. So the old trick still works, crab into a crosswind with the fuselage. Then swivel the trucks to roll straight. It is a party trick born of a particular design philosophy: make the machine strong. Then make it clever where strength won't do. On a work stand by the left inboard engine pod, Tech Sergeant Dev Patel briefs his team on rumbling changes the crew will never see, but will always feel the coming re-engining. The plan chooses Rolls-Royce F-130s, modern turbofans that promise better fuel burn, more thrust at altitude, and far fewer engine removals. The old TF-33s have served for generations. The F-130s will push the bomber toward the 2050s with a quieter, cleaner footprint and longer legs between tankers. In the avionics bay, an ASA radar pallet, a derivative of the APG-79 line, waits for its day, promising sea and land mapping, weather penetration, and GMTI-like target quality that navigators from the 1960s would have called science fiction. Even the designation is set to change H to J, a quiet nod that the bones endure while the organs renew. Engineering endurance is human as much as metal. Crew chiefs know which panels bite fingers, which Zeus fasteners spin freely, which cannon plugs like a whisper of dielectric grease. Depot civilians craftsmen who have watched this airframe longer than some pilots have been alive teach apprentices the smell of a weeping hydraulic line and the feel of a tired actuator. Structures shops map microscopic cracks with eddy current wands. NDI teams carry their science in pelican cases. Sheet metal artists flute replacement skins so new rivet lines won't ripple in the Oklahoma sun. The airplane is great because this tribe is stubborn. The flight deck keeps its character even as screens creep in. Big to round steam gauges sit beside fresh glass. The autopilot still a faithful mule. The throttle quadrant, a brass-edged altar worn smooth by generations of gloves. Systems that were once analog whispers now speak in packets. The EWO, who once interpreted green strobes on a scope, now reads emitter libraries and threat geolocation cues laced into data-linked chat. And yet, the checklist cadence. The call and response of trim, set, hydraulics, checked, fuel, balanced, remains the same hymn sung in different harmony. Ask pilots why the buff keeps winning auditions, and you get numbers: first payload, radius, time on station. Ask them again after a long deployment, and you get a different answer's temperament. A B-52 will loiter all night, listen, wait, and strike when the ground fight finally clarifies. It will drag its shadow over oceans to prove a point, then hold that point for hours. Its wiring closets have room for the next trick. Its spars have room for the next load. In war, capacity is a weapon. In peace, credibility is. The buff brings both. In the hangar at Tinker, Master Sergeant Torres signs off a job card, then looks up as the depot's tug eases the big jet back into daylight. The wingtips breathe. The outriggers kiss concrete with a practiced grace. Outside, a front rolls through, thunder grumbling over flat prairie. And the Stratofortress looks exactly as it should, old enough to be trusted, new enough where it counts. The secret, if there is one, is not mysterious at all. Overbuild the bones, leave space for tomorrow. Train the hands, then do it again, every few years, for as long as the world insists on needing you. The tug driver taps his horn, the jet moves. On a catwalk, a young airman pauses to take a picture, the bomber framed against a bruise-colored sky. He'll send it to his father, who crewed the same tail number when cassette tapes lived in flight bags. The reply comes back in seconds. Treat her right. She'll bring you home. Section 5. The future is now deterrence, re-engine, and a bomber for the 2050s, May 7th, 2024. Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. The ramp glows under sodium lights, palms hissing in a crosswind as a B-52H noses toward the hold short line. In the left seat, Major Nia Caldwell reads back the departure. To her right, Captain Evan Cho trims out the long wing for the gusts. On the lower deck, the navigator and radar navigator confirm the route, waypoints scalloping out across blue water airspace, and the EWO checks the self-protection suite. Libraries current, countermeasures snug in their trays. This is a bomber task force sortie, the kind that threads through the Indo-Pacific and Europe to say something without saying it. Reach, patience, credibility. On tonight's pylons ride JASSM ER shapes and captive trainers. In the bomb bay, test instrumentation that whispers about tomorrow. Rotation. Then lift wheels tuck. Outriggers snick home, and the old airplane becomes a quiet geography lesson. The crew levels at altitude. Link 16 fills with symbology. And a sniper pod grabs shoreline at 35 miles like a hawk's eye catching a field mouse. Caldwell looks over the panel. Steam gauges and glass coexist without argument. The Connect screen pulsing with a re-rolled target deck they won't need tonight. Somewhere out there, a destroyer prowls with its own radar heartbeat, farther inland. A brigade command post sleeps under camouflage netting. The Stratofortress settles into its hold. 8 turbofans grinding a note sailors use to time watches by. The plan to keep this airplane relevant past mid-century is not a single program, but a braid of them. First, new engines, modern turbofans that will replace the venerable TF-33s. Bringing quieter signatures, better specific fuel consumption, higher reliability, and fewer maintenance man-hours per flight hour. Range stretches, tanker demand eases, time on station grows by the hour. Second, a new AESA radar, adapted from contemporary fighter lineages, will give the B-52 all-weather mapping, maritime search, and moving target detection fidelity. Its early crews could only guess at, turning the big jet into a sensor-led shooter instead of just a bomb truck with good eyesight. The cockpit will absorb new displays, processors, and data links, knitting the bomber into the joint all-domain web, so targets can be found, fixed, and finished with a speed that makes distance irrelevant. Weapons evolve in step. The CAL-CM story is over now. The baton has passed to JASSM ER for hardened aim points, and LRASM for ships that thought they were safe beyond the horizon. For the nuclear mission, a new long-range standoff LRSO cruise missile is slated to replace the AGM-86B, restoring a stealthy, credible leg of the triad that can launch from far outside the densest air defenses. In test cells and software labs, the jet learns to speak fluently with targeting pods, GMTI-like radar modes, maritime ISR feeds, and coalition comms. The philosophy is simple and radical. Turn a 1950s airframe into a 21st century node, a persistent, high-capacity platform that senses, decides, and strikes as part of a wider organism. None of this happens without the culture that grew around the machine. At Barksdale, Minot, Tinker, and Edwards, pilots, WSOs, maintainers, software engineers, and depot artisans pass the craft like a family recipe. A crew chief with safety wire in his pocket teaches a new airman how a Zeus should feel when it seats. An avionics tech explains why a grounding strap, ignored, becomes a gremlin at FL300. A test pilot narrates the first flight after a heavy mod in the way a surgeon narrates a transplant. This is how a platform outlives the people who designed it, institutional memory married to hardware margin. The airplane keeps collecting unlikely assignments. In the Baltics, it flies corridors where its silhouette huge. Unmistakable does as much work as its weapons. Over the Arctic, it practices the old art of cold routes with new companion satellites, cybercells, patrol aircraft swapping tracks and tasking in a cloud of encrypted chat. Above the Persian Gulf, it pulls long orbits that reassure partners who count time not in minutes, but in presence. In the Western Pacific, it rehearses maritime strike packages, blends mine-laying concepts with standoff shots, and plays the unfair game of operational patience, waiting, adjusting, refusing to be hurried. There are still moments when the buff feels like a myth made real. On one of them, call it a Tuesday, The jet drifts through thin cirrus at FL 310 pod staring, radar painting. A joint terminal attack controller far below asks for a look at a crossing route near a village. The crew slews, confirms no civilians on the move, passes the grid back with a correction measured in meters. The strike belongs to another platform tonight. The B-52's contribution is time and certainty. Hours later, when a separate target needs cutting from the map, the big bomber is still there unimpressed by the clock, ready to write a clean period at the end of a messy sentence. In the hangars, the re-engined jets will earn a refreshed nameplate, a new letter for an old soul. But the essentials won't change. Long wings, big bay, honest systems, a temperament that forgives human beings for being human on their worst nights. The legend that the B-52 just won't quit turns out to be neither magic nor accident. It is design margin, modularity, and mission discipline, multiplied across decades of upgrades and hundreds of thousands of labor hours by people who treat the airplane not as a relic, but as a responsibility. Dawn pushes a gray seam onto the Black Pacific. Major Caldwell marks fuel, listens to the tanker check in, and smiles at how unhurried the numbers feel. She was a kid when her mother took her to an air show and said, "That big ugly one will be here when you're my age." She didn't believe it then. She believes it now. The receiver lights go green. The boom settles. And 8 engines drink quietly from a skyborne gas station, as if this, too, were part of the Earth's weather. If the bomber retires in the 2050s, it will be because commanders finally ran out of missions that ask for reach, stamina, and payload, not because the airplane ran out of ways to be useful. More likely, it will taxi out on some future evening and do what it has always done, arrive from far away and make distance meaningless. The Stratofortress was built for a war that never came, then found a lifetime of others to prevent or finish. That is not immortality. It is something harder and better relevance on demand.